দর্শক আমন্ত্রণ জানাচ্ছি সবাইকে চ্যানেল 24 এর সাপ্তাহিক আয়োজন ইনসাইডে। আজকে আমরা বাংলাদেশের টেলিকম ইন্ডাস্ট্রি নিয়ে আলোচনা করব। এর বাইরেও গ্লোবাল টেলিকম ইন্ডাস্ট্রির বিষয়গুলোও থাকবে, কারণ আমরা আজকে এমন একজন অতিথির সাথে আলোচনা করব বাংলাদেশের যে বড় বড় টেলিকম প্রতিষ্ঠানগুলো রয়েছে তারই একটি গ্লোবাল প্রতিষ্ঠানের চেয়ারম্যান আমাদের সাথে আছেন। আজিয়াটা গ্রুপ বারহাদের চেয়ারম্যান তানশ্রী শাহরিল, তিনি আমাদের আজকের অতিথি। আপনারা জানেন যে বাংলাদেশের রবি যে ব্র্যান্ডটা রয়েছে টেলিকম ইন্ডাস্ট্রিতে প্রায় 30% মার্কেট শেয়ার তাদের রয়েছে। রবির কিন্তু সবচেয়ে বড় ইনভেস্টর আজিয়াটা গ্রুপ। তিনি বাংলাদেশে এসেছেন, আমরা বিভিন্ন বিষয় নিয়ে তার সাথে আজকে আলোচনা করব। স্যার, ওয়েলকাম টু আওয়ার শো অ্যান্ড ওয়েলকাম টু বাংলাদেশ। হাউ ডু ইউ ফিল ইন বাংলাদেশ?
Thank you, Iqbal. I think I've always been very excited to come here and to meet our teams here. We see Bangladesh basically as a fantastic market, very high growth in terms of the young demographic population as well. And certainly for us, it's a place where we've always loved doing business, and we have a fair amount of investments already, and not just in Robi.
Axiata is the biggest investor in Robi in Bangladesh. So, as a long-term investor, how does you assess the outlook of Bangladesh?
We think the outlook is actually very promising. I think, yes, we noticed basically that there was some pressure in terms of basically forex and everything else in the last year or so, but with the recently concluded elections and a very stable government going forward, we look forward basically to seeing government policies being stable, tax policies being very clear and defined. It's a kind of environment which foreign investors, people like ourselves, are very keen to see succeed, because stability of policies and stability of basically regulations, right, and it really encourages us to think about the long-term investments that we have here.
Do you have any plan to expand your brand in the future more in Bangladesh?
We plan to keep investing in our successes here, right? So as I mentioned, Robi has consistently done well, and we have been very encouraged, I think, especially over the last couple of years in terms of basically their growth in revenue, their growth basically in profitability, and that growth has enabled Robi to keep investing and investing in areas such as the infrastructure and the network to ensure basically that we have coverage across more of the country, in improving quality of service for our customers, which is a very, very key point for them. And also to develop new products.
So there have some big issues from customer end in Bangladesh, like the quality of services, like call drop is a big issue right now. The internet quality is not good in Bangladesh, but cost is very high. Do you believe the same?
We actually look at the data and we consult very regularly with the regulators, BTRC and the ministry and everybody here. The data around call drops, for instance, we are in Bangladesh really no worse off than a lot of advanced countries in terms of the percentage of calls that actually suffer from call drops. Yes, we understand for the customer who experiences a call drop, it's irritating and of course it's frustrating. But if you actually look at the overall customer base and customer satisfaction with Robi services, I think it's very, very high. We understand, right? We cannot be perfect, and especially for something as technical as telecommunications, right? Especially mobile telecommunications, you will suffer from time to time occasional issues. We are working all the time to make sure that we minimize those disruptions for the customers.
Asiata is doing their business in ASEAN countries or South Asian countries. So we have some competitive countries also, like Indonesia. What's the major differences do business in Bangladesh rather than other countries?
I think all countries basically go through very similar profiles of growth, right? When you think about essentially how the economy grows and how the economy and the country changes over time. So if you look at some of the countries we are invested in, Malaysia of course being our core country where we started from, basically is a bit further along in terms of the digitization journey. Singapore, where we used to have business there as well, also very advanced on digitization. But we're seeing the same trends in all the countries that we operate in, whether it's Indonesia, Cambodia, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. And as the market matures and basically as governments focus on rolling out digital services and digital infrastructure, it's a very rapid ascension towards basically a much more digital lifestyle for the average consumer. I'll give you some data. For instance, today, data consumption in Malaysia is approximately about 6 to 7 times higher per person than it is in Bangladesh. But the rate of growth in Bangladesh is very fast as well. Right? So what you will see happening over the next 5 to 10 years basically is Bangladesh starting to match or to pick up basically in terms of the data consumption, very similar to neighboring countries, right? So India, for instance, Sri Lanka and all the other countries. And that's where the role of someone like Robi and E.co comes in, right? We have to keep investing successfully into the infrastructure to support that growth. And we work very closely, I think, with the regulators and the ministry to understand and for everybody to appreciate the kind of environment that's required for long-term investments to succeed. And that's why, like I mentioned earlier, stability of regulation, stability of tax policies are very, very important because long-term investors require that in order to make the kind of long-term investments they want to do.
As we know, Malaysia government now investing in 5G sector in their country. So, do you have the same plan in Bangladesh to do the same?
Yeah, I think 5G really is the next step in the evolution of mobile networks. And in Malaysia, we have successfully deployed now with coverage of almost 70+% of the population in terms of 5G coverage. The investments to 5G are, of course, very expensive. And for a country to justifiably make the investment, we need to make sure basically that it's sustainable so that basically there's a long-term case for the investment. So when we look at Bangladesh, we believe basically that time will come. It may not be so immediate as we think more about 4G coverage and making sure that 4G coverage extends across as wide of the country as possible, and to make sure that enough people will actually benefit from internet connectivity through the mobile space. So if you look at basically Bangladesh today, smartphone penetration is probably running at, I'd say, about 60% or so in Bangladesh. And actually we could, as operators and as government and the country as a whole, we could probably do more to uplift that first. Because what you want to make sure first is that everybody actually has a basic level of data connectivity first, right? Before we think about basically taking the next step and investing in 5G. Where we do see, I think, a strong market for 5G basically would be things like enterprise, for companies, for employers who require that kind of bandwidth and that kind of basically latency for their communications.
So what do you feel that which one is important right now to improve 4G or 3G or 2G quality or to invest in 5G sector in Bangladesh?
I think if you look really at countries which have successfully deployed 5G, right, as the next evolution of mobile data and mobile connectivity, and it's really for data. You're talking about, voice doesn't matter anymore. Right? It's all about data at that point in time. And countries which have had a very high penetration already of internet, then it makes sense. Because then what you're doing basically is you're making sure that at the very least, a very large proportion of the population, maybe 80%, 90% of the population is already connected. And then you think about uplifting the speeds for everybody. Right? Because I think what the government is doing in Bangladesh today is correct, focusing basically on the vision of connectivity for everybody first, and getting to a certain minimum level of connectivity through smartphone usage, through interconnectedness on 4G, and then really thinking about that 5G evolution next. Because 5G, like I said, is a very expensive investment for the country as a whole because there's a lot of importation of equipment, for instance, and you want to make sure basically that that investment actually pays off for the country in as short a term as possible.
Big portion of our population is out of non-smartphone there. So how can we improve this ecosystem?
What we have seen in a lot of countries basically is data connectivity and smartphone utilization depends a lot on the network effect, right? Meaning basically that for the user, people who don't already have a smartphone right now, what is the compelling reason for them to have a smartphone, right? Are there services or are there basically apps or services that they may want which are only available or better delivered through digital means? When that happens, then the demand really picks up. People feel as if they are missing out if they don't have the connectivity, and then what you then see basically is that escalation of the pickup. That's why in more digitized countries, right, countries like the US or China or closer to Asia, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, you now get to smartphone penetration of more than 90% because people feel basically that they cannot live their lives without being connected to the internet. Right? So it's a two-way system, right? It's about creating the demand among the population to be connected, at the same time through regulation and through the development of business, right? Providing those services, goods and other things through digital means that creates demand for the connectivity as well. On the cost side, it's also important to make sure that people have a choice, that there is basically a wide variety of devices at different price points that allows people to connect at even lower price points as well. So one of the big successes in developing countries like Malaysia or Thailand, where smartphone penetrations are at 80%, 90%, is having a wide variety of devices, from very cheap smartphones that provide some basic connectivity all the way to expensive smartphones, right? And that's important because you want to make sure that people feel that they are not being priced out of connectivity.
As we know, Axiata have their investment in different sectors in different countries, but in Bangladesh you have only telco sector in Bangladesh. So do you have any plan to invest in different sectors like IT or different investment?
So we are primarily invested in telcos and in digital infrastructure. So if you look at Axiata Group itself, those are two of our big pillars. The third pillar, which is basically in what we call services and the digital future. So in Malaysia, for instance, we have a digital bank. We also do things like digital advertising, digital services, and IT services and all the rest. It's something that in Bangladesh we're actually looking at very seriously now. So Robi itself basically is now focusing also on providing what we call enterprise services, and this is for small medium industries, helping them to digitize as we think about the goals of the government to digitize the country, right? How do we help businesses to also follow through and also do the same thing, right? What's their digital journey going to be? So learning from some of what our companies have done in other countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, Robi is doing the same thing here. They have now a separate business line which is reaching out to businesses and having to think things through like connectivity, cybersecurity, how they utilize the cloud for developing of their businesses to create their own digital businesses. And we believe basically that's one way we can help the country to also digitize for the long term. And that's in line with that third pillar of our business, which is really looking at digital services and IT services that can help basically in that journey as well.
What's your assessment about the investment environment in Bangladesh?
I think, like I said, it's one that's quite exciting. If you look at Bangladesh and its fundamentals, it's very, very strong. It has a very good demographic, very young, a very vibrant population that's very hardworking, that's always looking forward to the future. If you look at the economy is increasingly more and more diversified. So whereas in the past you would think of Bangladesh primarily because of the garments industry, but actually today it's got a very fast-growing services industry, other exports, and that economic complexity or the diversification of the economy is actually very, very important. I think the government's strategic goals towards digitalization is the right step as well. And as a telco and as a digital services provider, we're more than happy to invest to actually help that to come to fruition and to think about that as a long-term plan really on how we can help our customers, both individuals and businesses, right, to move forward into the future as well.
So my last question to you, do you have any specific roadmap for investment in Bangladesh?
For us, it's really driven by the long-term sustainability of those investments, right? So when I say that, it's because we've been increasingly successful in terms of both our revenue growth and our profit growth here in Bangladesh, and we are committed to reinvesting a significant portion of those profits that we make here back into the country in terms of basically investing in other services or new infrastructure. So edotco, our tower company, for instance, right, reinvests a lot into building new towers to increase connectivity for Bangladesh, especially in areas which are now lacking connectivity. Robi does the same. We are investing basically in rolling out more services into enterprise to help customers who are businesses think about basically their digital future as well. And for your average consumer they are working with, investing in new products like fixed wireless to the home to help them connect in the houses as well. So these are all things that we think will be part of the investment journey for a company like Robi and edotco here.
Thank you very much, sir. We're ending our show here.
Thank you very much.
দর্শকের সাথে শেষ করছি আজকের মতো ইনসাইট। ভালো থাকবেন সবাই।